Good day, Internet. Chavez and Valko here, the key to your immigration solutions. My name is Benjamin Hamilton. I'm a senior associate attorney overseeing our employment based practice. With me is associate attorney Andrew Craven. How's it going, Andrew?
Going good, Ben. How are you?
I'm doing well. And obviously, if you see our smiling faces, we are here to talk about all things employment based immigration. And today we are going to start talking about some of the residency options via employment. So these are typically referred to as employment based first preference category, second preference, third, right? So you'll hear us refer to EB-1, EB-2, EB-3. That's just some of the terminology. So when you see EB, that's in reference to residency as opposed to a visa. If you're interested in a non immigrant visa, we have a whole series on just about every employment based visa that you can go find at our Facebook and YouTube and all of that. But today we're starting with residency. And of course, naturally, we're going to start with EB-1, specifically a subcategory of EB-1. So we're going to refer to it today as the EB-1A for individuals with extraordinary ability. Andrew, what's our sort of basic definition of the EB-1A?
So, broad level, this is an immigrant visa classification that's available to foreign nationals with extraordinary ability in either the sciences, arts, education, business, or athletics.
So one key thing that we're going to mention here is that there is a visa, a non-immigrant visa that is similar. It is called the O1, in which we have a video on. The O1 has two parts: the O1A, which is like sciences and business and athletics, and the O1B, which is like, film and movies and all of that. So, one thing it's important to point out here is that when we talk about the EB-1A, it's actually a mashup, right? There's not an EB-1 that's separate for um, sciences from movies like there is for the O1A, O1B. For the EB1A, it's all mashed together into one. So how do they define extraordinary ability?
So basically, we're talking about a person that's at a level of expertise, indicating that that individual is in the small percentage of those who have risen to the very top of their field or endeavor. So not necessarily 1%, but like your top 15%.
So really, it's about showing that you're at the very top of your field. And what that field can be anything. So obviously some of the like easy ones are things where people are quote famous, right? So you're talking about athletes or actors or models, right? So these are just like some of the examples that are easy, right? Like models, you're looking at, hey, a sort of young expiring model who would actually falls under the H-1B visa, as opposed to a super famous model who could do an O1 or to an EB-1A, right? The difference there. Our experience is a very wide ranging, including some things you may not necessarily think would qualify because they're very nuanced. Some examples include chefs, a number involving athletics, um, including people that compete in things like taekwondo, uh, soccer coaches, and even someone who's specialty in athletics is actually as a team trainer doctor, um, a venture capitalist, an entrepreneur in machine learning, an entrepreneur in fire suppression, an entrepreneur in app development, a financial modeler for large scale renewable energy projects. Uh, cartoonist, that one's great. I love their work. A journalist. Oh, in one of my cases I did a long time ago, a big game hunter with his own shows on the Outdoor Channel. Um, so it's really open to any field of endeavor as long as you can show that you are really at the sort of top of your field. Andrew, what's the simplest way to qualify for an EB-1A?
So the simplest way, all you need is just one major internationally recognized award. So an easy one to get, a Nobel Prize or something along those lines.
What are some other examples of the one-time award that kind of catapults you into the EB-1A stratosphere?
So, I mean, this could be like Oscar, an Emmy, Tony, Wimbledon title, gold medals, things of that nature, where it's, just one time, but the peak of your field.
Yeah, so one of the things we were saying is like Giannis, who obviously is from Greece, won an NBA title and the NBA MVP, right? To be able to say, hey, winning the NBA MVP just kind of by itself is probably a one-time award that rises to the level of like, do I really need to show you anything else? I mean, I guess we could go down the list of all the other information you could provide, but really NBA MVP seems like full stop. He's an EB-1A caliber. He's definitely risen to the very top of his field. Obviously, the issue you run into is that this is great for fields where there are these awards shows, but most of us common people out here working our day-to-day jobs don't have awards or award shows where it's easy to say, hey, this guy was the best at this year or the best at that this year, right? So while this is the easiest way in terms of the simplest to show, it's the hardest maybe sometimes to get. So if I haven't won, if I'm in the NBA and I haven't won the NBA MVP, if I haven't, I'm competing, I'm a tennis player, but I haven't won the Wimbledon yet, or I'm an actor, but I haven't won an Oscar, how do I show that I meet the criteria of an EB-1A?
So in that case, you would have to demonstrate that the beneficiary has sustained national or international acclaim, and that their achievements have been recognized in the field of their expertise by 3 of 10 criteria.
So I think we can display those here really quickly. So there are 10 criteria. Now, again, going back to the visa, there's the O1A and the O1B. The O1A has 8 criteria. The O1B has 6 criteria. There's some overlap. And again, for the EB-1A, they just mash those two together. So obviously, we're gonna go through all these kind of one by one, but you can see that it's a lesser national award, membership in association that requires excellence, published materials about the person, published materials by the person, right? Evidence of original contributions, authorship of scholarly articles, right? As you kind of go down this list, you can see, there's a number of different ways to qualify. And again, you only have to be able to demonstrate 3 of these 10, right? It's not all 10, it's just 3. So let's kind of jump into the first one here. Documentation of the alien's receipt of lesser nationally or internationally recognized prizes or awards for excellence in the field of endeavor. So this is the first one. Andrew, let's say I got an award from my local newspaper, I don't know, for best barbecue restaurant. Is that really going to fit into this category?
No, and I mean, certain other things you're going to look at, like a school award or a scholarship, really aren't going to raise to that level either. Generally, we're talking about things that are either, on a national level. So maybe not the local paper, but did you get into the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal? Was it at that level that, either the country is talking about you or the world is talking about you? So,
the difference between, as a restaurateur getting a award from the local newspaper as opposed to getting a Michelin star, right? Which is kind of this like internationally recognized, I guess award or recognition. One of the key things you have to remember in discussing all of these categories is you have to be able to back it up. Meaning, if you got some award, it's not necessarily enough to just say, I got this award. A lot of the time, USCIS wants you to present evidence as to what was the process by selecting people, right? And who were the people that were determining the award? And then what were their criteria for awarding the award? And this sort of analysis applies to every one of these categories. You got to be able to just back it up. Again, it's not enough to just say, hey, I got this cool award. Here you go. Well, why is it? I mean, other than like, again, a Grammy or something, you don't need to explain that. It's Grammy's a Grammy, right? Everyone knows what that is. So, okay, the second one is documentation of the alien's membership in associations in the field for which classification is sought, which require outstanding achievements of their members as judged by recognized national or international experts in their disciplines or fields. I mean, Andrew, we're both attorneys. We're members of the Texas Bar. Does that qualify?
No. So again, this really goes to backing up what were the requirements that got you there. So being a member of the bar isn't something that would put us in the top, 20, 15, or 10% of our field. That's the basics. So things that might be difficult to get, but don't somehow elevate you. So, being a member of, say, a trade association for a doctor or something along those lines, still you have to be in a membership of a group that is in some way, more difficult to get into and judged by some kind of a peer group.
Yeah. So again, coming back to, you have to show that it requires outstanding achievement. I mean, one of, for example, that we've argued in the athletics fields is people that have been members of like national teams. Like I was a member of the Olympic team, I was a member of the national team for a number of years, to say, well, that is difficult, right? It requires outstanding achievement. It requires that you be one of the best at your sport from your country. And, there's a selection process in all this to get selected. So if you're saying, hey, I may not have won a gold medal, but I competed for the Russian Olympic team, to say, well, that may qualify as membership in an association. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of look at this and argue it. The most important thing is being able to back it up. So number 3 here, published material in professional or major trade publications or major media relating to the alien's work in the field for which classification is sought. Hey, I'm a musician, and I got tons of paid advertising in all these different magazines, hyping our upcoming concert or event, right? Does that qualify?
No. So again, like when you're getting into this, but here I think you also need to consider the fact that this doesn't have to be US media. It doesn't have to be a specific, there's not a lot of detail here versus it has to be a trade publication or professional. So as long as it relates to your field, whether that's, if you're a tech entrepreneur, we can look at, even foreign tech magazines versus our Wired or Forbes, things of that nature. But yeah, it really just has to be related to your field and this independent recognition of your material.
I mean, the main thing is it's not going to be paid advertising. It should really be sort of independent journalism, not just about you, just in general, that mentions you, but actually discusses, whatever your extraordinary ability is. Again, with a lot of these sort of entrepreneurial types, the information hasn't appeared in professional or major trade publications, but rather in major media. And when it comes to major media, a lot of times we just look at circulation, and if it has a high circulation, that qualifies. And that can be a high circulation just in your country of origin. It doesn't necessarily have to be major media in the United States. So a lot of times, we look at resources such as Alexa, not the device in your house that you yell at all the time, but the actually web services, Alexa, where you can go in and look up, website rankings by country and by industry. So we get this like magazine article about a client from some magazine in Slovakia, and we're like, I don't know what this is. We go to Alexa, and it turns out that it's like the third most, used website in the country. And you go, oh, wow, this is major media. And again, it can't just be like a mention really about you. It needs to kind of discuss in more detail. So again, that's not only supplying the article, but you may have to supply additional evidence to show that it qualifies as a professional or major trade publication or major media. So let's see. Number 4, evidence of the alien's participation on a panel or individually as a judge of the work of others in the same or in an allied field of specialization to that for which classification is sought. So, Andrew, let's think of an example here. Actually, an example that we've used is somebody who was a coach of a national team and saying that, well, does that qualify as judging the work of others? Because they're charged with selecting the members of the national team. And of course, that's in their field of specialization. So that is one we have used and argued successfully. Andrew, any thoughts on judging the work of others?
Well, I think a part of what we really have to focus on is why were you selected to judge the work of others? So in some cases, we've seen people in the tech field where it will list, well, they've started this business, they've shown success with the technology that they work on, so they were selected to judge up and coming entrepreneurs or tech geniuses in these competitions. And here you can look at, well, if this person was chosen to select the national team, clearly they know the sport, they're skilled enough to know what's going to make an athlete that can compete at that level. So in some cases, it's obvious. In other cases, we'll look for a publication that lists why this person was selected to judge, or, we'll go to whoever selected them as a judge, whether that's an organization or an individual, and have them write a letter explaining these are the criteria that we look for with our coaches or our judges or our panel members, and this is why they were selected, which, helps tie everything back into why is this an individual with extraordinary ability.
And sometimes we also look at the other judges too. So if you're talking, like we've seen a number of these, sort of entrepreneurs in the tech space who are doing these like tech crunch type events where they're judging other people and saying, well, who were the other judges? A lot of times there's a panel of judges and say, were these all fairly prestigious people within the tech world? Or, was it my just, friend from who, we shared a dorm room for a week or something? You know what I mean? Like we look at not only what were if they have defined criteria, and if they don't have defined criteria, well, who are the other people? They say, well, no, look, everyone that they selected to judge, these are all like movers and shakers in the tech world. So clearly, it's a high standard. And again, it's all about being able to back it up. So here comes the most, I don't know, maybe difficult one. Evidence of the alien's original scientific, scholarly, or business-related contributions of major significance in the field. Andrew, what's one of the number one ways we document this?
Support letters. Just a lot of, sorry.
What's the number one problem with support letters?
People not truly explaining how everything ties in.
Details, right? So often we get a support letter. It's like, I know so-and-so. I think he's amazing. You should give him a green card. And USCIS looks at that and throws it in the trash, right? Because it doesn't help. They want details. First off, the person writing the letter, what are their qualifications to even write this letter, to judge this person, right? Secondly, how do they know this person? And then third, can you speak very specifically about what it is they've done and why why is it original? Why is it scholarly, right? And again, obviously we can get letters. Sometimes we have letters that address 3 or 4 points. Sometimes we have letters that address just one specific point, right? So you sometimes can have this collection of letters that address many things, one thing specifically, but the key is details. Be specific. If you're not specific, USCIS does not care. They will not give any weight to that letter. This is also one that pops up where you talk about people who have written scholarly articles. Again, going back to citations, right? Meaning hey, me writing an article that appears in this major journal qualifies for one criteria, but the fact that it's been heavily cited maybe makes it then qualifies for this criteria. So it's really about being able to back it up. Another thing I want to throw out there, while things like patents help by themselves, just showing I have a patent is not enough to satisfy this criteria, right? You need, again, like a letter to back up, well, why is this patent relevant? Like, who is using it? Is it innovative? Has it changed anything? Because again, one that tends to pop up is like, hey, I got a patent. Like, cool. That doesn't automatically mean you qualify. And that relates back actually to the next one, which is evidence of the alien's authorship of scholarly articles in the field in professional journals or other major media. So there's the one criteria where it's published material about you, and then there's published material by you. And again, if it's in a professional journal and it's heavily cited, it may help satisfy the prior criteria. Andrew, any comments about scholarly articles or major media?
I think, we've really touched on a lot of those points, which is how much have you been cited? What was the circulation? It can't be just paid advertisement. This has to be something that you were really selected for. But something I did want to touch on, just kind of now that we're halfway through the list, because we've mentioned entrepreneurs that start, say, companies, people that are members on a team. For all of these things, you always have to tie it back to the individual's extraordinary ability. You never want to just rely on, well, I was a part of the team, but I was, the towel boy, or my company does great things and I clean the floors. If you have these situations, you always need to tie it into this company is a success because I, brought this to the table, and that extraordinary ability directly translates through the success of my business, the success of my team, or what have you.
And sometimes, what happens is you find this great article talking about how, hey, this tech startup is doing these amazing things. So that kind of satisfies one of the criteria. But then you go get, let's say, a recommendation letter from an industry expert, or maybe someone from in the company, maybe like the CEO, where it singles out the beneficiary, the foreign national, and describes in detail how they contributed to this, what their role was in it, right? So you have to really kind of separate that out. I always, when you see there's that Academy Award and there's like 30 people that go up to receive it sometimes, as opposed to like best actor, right? One dude. But like there's some where like a whole bunch of people go up and you're kind of like, I'm not sure. Like that one may be a little bit harder to argue that qualifies as like that one-time award because it was given to a group of people. You would actually have to kind of present some additional evidence to single out that person. A good example here is, for example, you get a tech entrepreneur who gets named to Forbes's 30 under 30 list, right? So we say, oh, this is published material about them, about their extraordinary ability. They were selected to this list, and we've actually gotten letters from Forbes saying how they select these people, and then that same person then Forbes asks them to write articles for them. So now all of a sudden they're satisfying a second criteria because they're authoring articles that appear in major media, saying that Forbes is major media. So sometimes you can, hit multiple criteria this way. Let's see. We're on number 7, right? Evidence of display of the foreign national's work in the field at artistic exhibitions or showcases. This is one of those ones that relates back to, remember, there's the O-1A and the O-1B, like the O-1B for like the arts and entertainment and stuff. Evidence of display of the foreign nationals' work in the field at artistic exhibitions or showcases. Andrew, any comments here?
I think this one's pretty straightforward. Again, I'm sure that I personally have not worked with a lot of artists, but the more you can show that, well, this wasn't a minor exhibit, but a major exhibit. So something versus of, your school show versus I was in the Met, I'm sure would matter, but outside that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and then again, it comes down to Was it an individualized exhibit, like it was just your work, which obviously would be the best evidence, or was your work part of a bigger exhibit? And if so, then again, what was the prestige of the exhibit itself? So again, it's all coming back to documenting that stuff. Let's see. Oh, here's let's see. Number 8 is one that we use a lot, and it applies to both the O1A, O1B, so EB-1A across the board. Evidence that the alien has been employed in a critical or essential capacity for organizations and establishments that have a distinguished reputation. The key here is that this is a two-parter. People kind of forget. So 1, I have to show that the person was employed in a critical or essential capacity. Again, relating back to the, hey, this big group of guys won an Academy Award and I was one of them. Well, what was your role, right? Were you the dude that was getting all these other guys coffee, or were you one of the lead people? But it also says for an organization that has a distinguished reputation, right? So it's like, well, I was a CEO. That was critical. Yeah, for a company that no one's ever heard of that has like 1 employee, right? And it's you. The company itself doesn't have a distinguished reputation. Andrew, any comments on this criteria?
No, but I mean, this one does really tie into a lot of the others. Like we've talked about, if you're the coach, if you're the CEO or the founder, but it is really important to make sure that you've brought all the pieces of the puzzle and tied it all together. So really shown both parts of this criteria.
And you may need to provide documentation related to both. You maybe, again, you find articles about the company proving that it has a distinguished reputation, and then you tie that back to like employment verification letters, support letters talking about the individual specific role. So a lot of people we've dealt with have been like entrepreneurs. So obviously they're like the founder, owner, the critical or essential capacity is pretty straightforward. Others have been, maybe like a CTO or something like that, where we have to do a little bit more work to prove it. But yeah, again, saying, hey, this guy's the coach of a national team. Well, isn't a national team a distinguished organization, and isn't that an essential capacity because he's, again, the coach of the national team? Or again, he's the head chef at this restaurant. Well, we'd have to document that A, he's the head chef, critical essential capacity, and then B, well, what's the reputation of the restaurant, right? Is this some little hole in the wall place in a strip mall, or is this some place that's got 5-star reviews or a Michelin star or whatever? You have to really tie those two together. But in our experience, this 8th criteria is one that we use heavily. But it can sometimes be tricky. Again, you're talking about someone that, hey, I worked on 10 or 12 movies that clearly have a distinguished reputation. We can go look at Rotten Tomatoes ratings. Did they win any Oscars? What were their grosses? But then it relates back to, well, did you have a critical or essential capacity on that film? There's hundreds and hundreds of people that work on a movie, thousands in some cases. And can we argue that your role was critical or essential? Going down to number 9, evidence of commercial success in the performing arts as shown by box office receipts or record, cassette, compact disc, or video sales. Andrew, any comments here?
I would really like to work with someone that in 2021 manages to be a commercial success with cassette sales.
Well, what about vinyl? On a side note, the other day, my daughter bought a CD, and I was like, what are you doing? We don't have anything in the house that can actually play a CD. And she's like, it's vintage. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm getting old. CDs are vintage. But anyway, again, we're talking about hey, I was a recording artist, right? Well, have you won any of have you gone platinum? Have you gone gold or whatever all their things are? Oh, I worked on I was in a movie. Okay, well, what was gross for the movie? Did it win any awards? What's its rating? Obviously, these days that can be a little bit more tricky, just because it's a little bit more nebulous, right? Because, well, what about YouTube? Because these days people don't sell albums, so you can look at streams on Spotify. Oh, I got 300 million streams on Spotify. Or, one of the ones we worked with, the cartoonist, they're very heavily on YouTube. And it's like, hey, every video we put up gets 5 million views. And, our channel has over 1 billion views worldwide. So you start looking at a lot of the, YouTube and Spotify and Netflix. It's not so much about box office. Again, this is just a reflection of the fact that the government hasn't updated anything in 30 years to accommodate for advances and changes in technology. But this is stuff we have done. Is again, look at YouTube views. What's their average per video? And again, if you're a YouTuber, you have all these metrics where you can show, how many likes and dislikes are you getting, to show engagement, comment. Same thing with TikTok. Again, you're looking at, oh my gosh, I don't remember their name anymore, but those two sisters, right, that are like the big TikTokers, right? I mean, they're U.S. citizens, but if they weren't, I think you could look at like 100 million TikTok subscribers and say, I think this is going to hit probably 3 or 4 of these criteria, what they're doing on TikTok. So again, we've had to we've made these arguments successfully in the past, specifically with YouTube in a number of cases, and now TikTok and everything else, or Twitch, right? What's your hey, every time I stream I get 50,000 concurrent viewers. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, there's a lot of network TV shows that don't do the amount of concurrent views that some Twitch streamers get. And the last one, number 10, evidence that the alien has commanded a high salary or other significant high remuneration for services in relation to others in the field. So, hey, Andrew, some people might, especially English isn't their first language, remuneration. What is that?
So generally we would be talking about things like salary, but really we're talking about any compensation for your work. So whether, and I guess the area where we've gotten creative with this is it doesn't have to be that you were paid, a direct salary for your work, but what if you started a company and that company has a high income? Well, potentially that's your remuneration, or if you own a chunk of that company, and so you've basically earned the money, you're just leaving it in the business.
Yeah, what if remuneration is essentially just any form of compensation? What if you're Elon Musk, right? I mean, you probably don't have any salary whatsoever, but you're worth $300 billion in terms of the valuation of the company. Again, going back to like the YouTuber example, a lot of these guys aren't getting a salary from anyone. They're earning ad revenue off of YouTube. They're getting endorsement deals, right, where they're getting paid for like ad placement or placing product placement and stuff. So they may be getting money from a number of different sources, affiliate links, right? And then when you put it all together, you say, wow, this person's making $15-20 million, although very little of it, maybe none of it's salary. But that would put them at the very, very top. One thing we do look at when it comes to salary, you do look at it at a national level comparatively. So we do have to look at someone that is in a specific field. Like, hey, I don't know, I'm the greatest mechanical engineer in the United States, right? Well, we compare them to sort of, well, what do mechanical engineers make? What's the national average? And the Department of Labor has those numbers, and they have the median. They have like the 25 percentile, like in the median, the average, and then the 75 percentile. We like to be able to argue if we're going that route, like in terms of salary, we prefer to argue that you're like top 10%. But there's actually not a defined number or range there. It's very much a sort of collective analysis of everything. But again, if we're going straight salary, we like to argue that you're like top 10% nationally. And then again, if it's someone's like an owner of the company, then we're starting to look at, well, what's the valuation? If you own the company, what's the valuation of the company that you own? And then all sources of income collectively. Like, again, hey, I'm a movie producer and I just got $100 million to fund my latest project. To be like, well, if you're able to get people to buy in to the point where they'll invest $100 million in your movie, that seems like high remuneration for services, right? Even though that's not all going to you. I mean, but anyway, We look at a lot of different factors to prove this, and it's one we argue fairly commonly, but it depends. I mean, I don't know. Just so you know, a top tier Taekwondo athlete and coach, we're not arguing high salary. Just for a lot of the athletes in the sort of non-traditional sports, right? Again, if you're talking about like football or basketball, yes. But for the non-traditional sports, no. A lot of the ones like in the Olympics that you've never heard of, like, I don't know, curling, for example, probably not commanding a high salary for curling. All right. So move on to address a couple more little details. One of the things we talk about, we've talked about is sort of the differences between the EB-1A and the O1, because a lot of people who are thinking about applying for residency via the EB-1A have an O1, right? So they're wanting to know, well, what are some of the differences between the two? They're very similar. Like, again, we're saying that those 10 criteria are kind of a mashup of the O1A and the O1B, but there are some key differences, some good, some bad, between the two. Well, the first thing to know is that it's specifically in the adjudicator's field manual for USCIS. Like, it specifically says just because someone has an O1, they're not automatically qualify. You do have to look at it on an individual basis. So, Andrew, what are some of the key differences? Like, what's the first key difference?
So the first thing is that the beneficiary can actually self-petition, so long as they meet all the criteria for both petitioner and beneficiary. You don't have to mess around with an agent or a company that's going to hire you. You just have to be coming to the U.S. to pursue the endeavor that you have extraordinary ability in.
Yeah, so with the O1, you need either an agent or you need a petitioner. Now, sometimes you're kind of technically self-petitioning because the petitioner is the company that you own, right? But you can't like direct self-petition. Here you can, but again, it's not enough to just say, hey, I did all these amazing things in my country, give me the EB-1A. Like, if you're self-petitioning, you still have to show that you're going to be doing the same thing here, that you have, I don't know, some contracts or interests or job lined up. Like, you still got to be able to show that you're going to continue in your field of extraordinary ability when you get here. Obviously, if you have a petitioner, that's a little more straightforward because you have someone hiring you and sponsoring you. If it's self-petition, maybe a little bit more difficult to put together some of that evidence. What's kind of one of the second key differences?
So they use what they call a more exacting standard than they would with the O1A. So essentially, and you see this with other immigrant categories too, generally USCIS is going to be stricter with immigrant visas versus non-immigrant visas because this is someone coming here to permanently live in the US.
Exactly. If I get an O1, it's for 3 years and then I have to come back. So they may be a little bit more lenient. When it comes to residency, right, that's the whole ball game. In general, residency is the most difficult thing to achieve in the United States. Once you become a resident, becoming a citizen's not that difficult. You just got to wait 3 to 5 years and stay out of trouble and pay your taxes. So they tend to enforce a higher standard. Specifically in the cases of EB-1A, there is the dreaded Kazarian case. Kazarian, this is the annoying case. So basically what can happen is I've seen it happen where USCIS accepts that someone has met 3 of the 10 criteria. And in 95% of the cases you meet 3 of the 10, right? You're probably going to get approved. But every so often they'll throw out the Kazarian argument that allows them to essentially say, well, you've met 3 of the 10, but we don't think you quite rise to the standard. Let me pull out the actual language here. Here we go. While the quality and caliber of the evidence should be evaluated, no determination is made as this step regarding whether the individual has risen to the top of the field of endeavor or has sustained national or international claim. The adjudicator concludes that the required number of categories has not been fulfilled, the petition will be denied. However, the adjudicator concludes that the required number of categories has been fulfilled. The adjudicator then moves to a final merits determination by which the quality of the evidence is considered and the evidence evaluated together to determine if the definition of extraordinary ability is met. So you have to be wary of Kazarian, because Kazarian allows them to say, yes, you have satisfied 3 of 10 or 4 of 10 or 5 of 10. You have met that legal burden. But we're allowed to take a step back and make a final merits determination where we evaluate everything and determine, have you really risen to the level that qualifies? So you always have to be wary of Kazarian. What is another key difference between the O1 and the EB-1A?
This is actually kind of a big one. There's no advisory opinion needed for the EB-1A. So,
Advisory opinion is if whatever you do, there's a related union to it. You think of like actors, anything related to film and TV, there's all kinds of unions, or some sports leagues. If there is a union related to whatever you do, it doesn't matter if you're a member of it or not, you have to get an advisory opinion for an O. That is not required for an EB-1A. So a lot of people have it and they're like, well, do I have from 3 years ago, I got this. Do I need it? It's like, no, actually you don't for an EB-1A. What is the fourth difference?
so this is real specific to the 10th category that we were talking about above. They have to have commanded a high salary, versus with an O1, you can show that they're going to command a high salary. So for an O1, say your petitioner says, yeah, I'm going to pay him a bunch of money once he starts his concert tour or once the movie's done. Well, that would work. For the EB-1A, you have to show that in the past you have already been commanding that high salary.
Obviously, one of the other differences is how the O1A, the O separates out the O1A and the O1B with their own requirements, and how with the EB-1A, those are just kind of mashed together into one, category. Are there any other sort of key differences between the two?
The last one is just that the EB-1A doesn't have to be for a particular event, which when you think about it makes sense. If you're coming here on an O1, you've got this temporary period. You really have to show that you're coming to do something specific. You have a concert tour, or you're going to make a movie or start a company. Versus with the EB-1A, you just have to show that you're going to work in that field, or more than likely going to continue this work. It doesn't have to be a one-off concert or a one-off anything.
Yeah, the O1, they always hammer you on. We want to see your itinerary. We want to see your itinerary. We want, and that's not quite as exacting on the EB-1A if you meet all the criteria. So talk a little bit about the process. So do I require a labor certification to apply for an EB-1A?
No, and that's really a huge time saver. I know we'll get into the whole labor cert process in some other videos, but skipping that, you no longer have to go through the Department of Labor. You don't have to test the employment pool, anything like this. You put together all the evidence and file directly with USCIS.
So when I got my O1, my employer agent, whoever filed the form I-129, well, what form are we filing here to request the EB-1A?
This would be an I-140.
So the form I-140, so basically you submit the form I-140 to the correct address along with the filing fee. How much is the filing fee for the I-140?
$700.
Along with all my supporting evidence, right? I send my check, my forms, all my supporting evidence to the correct address. How long is it going to take?
Looking at the numbers from USCIS right now, between 10 and 27 months.
I love how they give you these like massive ranges, like 10 or 27. You're like, dude, that's like under a year to over 2 years. Like, seriously? I would say the majority of cases tend to fall towards the bottom end of most of these numbers. If you get a request for evidence, obviously that can make it take longer. They send out a letter. It's usually a boilerplate where they just copy and paste off a template. They're really frustrating when you get these things. And you typically get 87 days to respond. But can I premium process an I-140 requesting under the EB-1A category?
Yes. So there are few exceptions to when you can't premium process on the I-140, but with the EB-1A, you can premium process. That's Form I-907 and the low fee of $2,500.
And how long is it going to take?
In that case, they have 15 days to process. Uh, in the event that you get an RFE, once you respond to that RFE, that 15-day calendar starts back over.
One other benefit to premium processing is not just cutting down on the time, but it also opens up channels of communication. USCIS is a black hole of communication, right? All you can do is call their 1-800 number, which sends you to a machine whose number one job is to not allow you to talk to anybody and run you into circles unless you know like the magic words. Whereas if you're dealing with premium processing, they actually have a dedicated email addresses for each premium processing unit at each service center. And they tend to respond pretty quickly. I mean, within 24 hours. So not only does it speed up the case, but it opens up lines of communication you wouldn't otherwise have. So sometimes that $2,500, can be worth it. So if you are interested in filing for residency under the employment-based first category as an individual extraordinary ability, reach out to us. You can go to our website, book a consultation, email, whatever it may be. We're here to talk with you to, first evaluate your case and see whether or not you qualify, and whether or not we can help you. Also, go download our app, the Lawpilot GUARDIAN. It's a great app. It's free with a lot of useful information, and we're constantly sort of building in new details and new features. Anyway, stay tuned to our future videos where we will be discussing all of the ways to apply for residency via employment. Also, go check out all of our videos on all the different visa options. And also stay tuned as immigration updates come. We do videos on all the updates to try to keep you all informed. Andrew, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
And hey, for all those watching, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.